What if your own husband trapped you in a foreign country, and the only way out was to flee in the dead of night, with your child in your arms? This isn't a movie plot. It's real. And when Hollywood turned it into a film, an entire country banned it. This is the true story behind Not Without My Daughter, the movie Iran never wanted the world to see. In 1991, Oscar winner Sally Field took on one of the most intense roles of her career. Betty Mahmoody, a real-life American woman who married an Iranian doctor and traveled with him and their daughter to Iran for what was supposed to be a short visit. But once they landed, Betty was told she could never leave. And neither could her daughter. Her husband, played in the film by Alfred Molina, transformed from a gentle doctor into a brutal captor, at least. That's how the story was told. The film dramatizes Betty's desperate, dangerous escape from Tehran, across mountains, borders, and secret smugglers, all to get her daughter home. In 1984, Iranian physician Syed Bozorg, Moody Mahmoody, lives a quiet, happy life in the United States with his American wife Betty and their young daughter Mahtab. Moody tells Betty his family wants to meet her in Mahtab and asks them to accompany him for a 2-week visit to Iran. Despite her deep fears, Betty reluctantly agrees after Moody promises they will safely return to America. Upon their arrival, Moody and Mahtab are embraced, while Betty's unfamiliarity with the Islamic lifestyle inadvertently offends some members of Moody's family. One evening, Moody reveals he had been fired from the hospital 2 days prior to their departure, telling Betty he was often mocked and ridiculed by the American staff there. Betty promises they will rectify the situation when they get home. The night before their flight back to the United States, Moody's brother Mammal tells them that in order for them to get on their flight, their passports should have been taken to the airport for approval 3 days ago. When Betty insists they go to the airport anyway, Moody reveals he never intended for them to return, and that they will remain in Iran permanently, where he will continue working as a doctor. When Betty protests, Moody becomes enraged and strikes her. Betty tries to earn sympathy from Moody's family, but is scorned by them. Iran's war with Iraq continues, and Moody becomes more hostile and abusive towards Betty, preventing her from leaving the house or using the telephone, claiming his family are watching her all the time. One day, Betty answers a phone call from her mother and reveals she is trapped in Iran. Her mother tells her to seek help from the American interest section of the Swiss embassy. Betty sneaks out of the house and visits the embassy, but is told that under Iran's nationality law, she acquired Iranian citizenship upon her marriage to Moody, and thus is not entitled to consular protection. Because Iran is an Islamic republic governed by Sharia law, Betty cannot leave the country or make decisions concerning her daughter without her husband's permission. Moody, alarmed by Betty's absence from the house, threatens to kill her if she tries anything again. Betty begins to conform to her husband's wishes in order to gain his trust, and convinces him they should move into Mammal's home. During a trip to the market, Betty meets a kind, sympathetic storekeeper who allows her to use his telephone and overhears her plea for help to the Swiss embassy. He puts her in contact with a pair of humanitarian Iranians, Hossein and his sister, who offer to help Betty and Mahtab return to the United States. Betty accepts Hossein's assistance after he warns her that when Mahtab turns 9 years old, she could be at risk of being forced into marriage or drafted as a child soldier. Mahtab does not adjust to her new Iranian school and has to be accompanied by Betty. The female staff sympathize with their situation and allow her to bring Mahtab to school later than normal. Betty uses this time to meet with Hossein, and they discuss an escape route. One morning, when she and Mahtab arrive at school, Moody is there waiting for them and viciously attacks Betty, as well as striking Mahtab. They have no choice but to return home with Moody. He separates the two of them for a few nights to taunt Betty. 6 months later, Betty learns that her father is seriously ill. Moody tells her she can return to America to see him, but will not let Mahtab go with her. He orders her to liquidate their assets while there, then return to Iran. Knowing she is running out of time, Betty and Mahtab leave the house on the pretense of going to buy presents for her father, while Moody is called to the hospital for an emergency. They go to Hussein, who supplies Betty and Mahtab with fake identity documents, and they make their way past many checkpoints with Iranian smugglers. After several days, Betty and Mahtab are dropped off in a street in Ankara, where they see the flag of the American embassy in the distance. Betty and Mahtab retreat safely to the United States before divorcing Moody, where Betty goes on to become a successful author and dedicates herself to helping those in similar situations. The backlash was instant. While audiences in the West watched in horror, Iran exploded in outrage. The movie was banned outright, not just from cinemas, but from television, home release, and even discussion. Iranian officials called it racist, anti-Islamic, and full of lies. They claimed it painted all Iranian men as monsters. They said it wasn't a film, it was propaganda. Protests broke out. Iranian scholars, filmmakers, and families said the film didn't show the real Iran, just a Hollywood fantasy wrapped in fear. Even some Western critics agreed. Was the film telling Betty's personal truth, or smearing a whole culture? Despite the ban, Not Without My Daughter became a box office hit. Betty Mahmoody went on to give interviews around the world, write books, and speak about women's rights. But she was also criticized, even accused of exaggerating her story. As for Sally Field, the role changed her forever. She called it the most terrifying shoot of her life, not because of acting, but because of the story's raw truth. And Alfred Molina? He received hate from both sides for playing a villain many Iranians believed was unfair, and for doing it so well, it chilled audiences to the bone. The real family? Betty and her daughter never returned to Iran. The father, Dr. Mahmoody, later gave his own interviews, saying he was the one who was betrayed. Was it a mother's desperate cry for help? Or was it a weaponized story against a whole country? That's for you to decide. One thing's clear, this movie didn't just break box office records. It broke borders and left scars that still haven't healed. For more banned movies and real stories Hollywood tried to hide, follow or subscribe the channel.